If you know it, sing it with me.
He's coming on the clouds. Kings and kingdoms will bow down. And every chain will break as broken hearts declare His praise. For who can stop the Lord Almighty? Our God is the Lion of Judah. He's roaring with power and fighting our battles. And every knee will bow before Him. It's our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sins of the world. His blood breaks the chains, and every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. And every knee will bow before Him. So open up the gates. So open up the gates. Make way before the King of Kings. Sing to God. The God who comes to save is here to set the captives free. For who can stop the Lord Almighty? And our God is the Lion of Judah. He's roaring with power and fighting our battles. And every knee will bow before Him. And our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sins of the world. His blood breaks the chains, and every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. And every knee will bow before Him. For who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? No one. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Come on. Who can stop the Lord? Sing our God, hey! It's our God is the Lion of Judah. He's roaring with power, fighting our battles. And every knee will bow before Him. And our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sins of the world. His blood breaks the chains, and every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. And every knee will bow before Him. While you're home, just lift up a shout of praise this morning to the Lord, amen. Here we go. Darkness tries to roll over my bones. When sorrow comes to steal the joy I own. Brokenness and pain is all I know. Though I won't be shaken. I won't be shaken. Come on, sing this out. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I'm standing in Your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I'm standing in Your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I'm standing in Your love. Come on, Sing this out.
She no longer has a place to hide. I am not a captive to your lies. I'm not afraid to leave my past behind. I won't be shaken. I won't be shaken.
Come on, sing that. Hey.
My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love.
Sing this power.
There's power that can break off every chain. There's power that can empty out a grave. There's resurrection power that can save. There's power in your name. There's power in your name. There's power that can break off every chain. There's power that can empty out the grave. There's resurrection power that can save. There's power in your name. There's power in your name.
Sing my fear. Hey.
'Cause my fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love.
Come on, sing my fear. Hey.
My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love.
Stay in His presence this morning. Stay in His presence, stay in His calm. Here, as we wait and seek Your face, come and make Your throne upon our praise. Here, in this place, have Your way. The moment that we see You, we are changed. Show us Your glory. Show us Your glory. In wonder and surrender we fall down. Show us Your glory. Show us Your glory. Let every burning heart be holy ground. Here, not by power, not by might, but only by the cross we come alive. Here we're undone, overcome by heaven's love revealed before our eyes. Show us Your glory. Show us us your glory. Let every burning heart be holy ground. Show us your glory. Show us your glory. In wonder and surrender we fall down. Show us your glory. Show us your glory. Let every burning heart be holy ground. Here at your feet, God, we feel your peace, Jesus. Chains fall, fear bow here now. Jesus, you change everything. Lives healed, hope found here now. Jesus, you change everything. Chains fall, fear bow here and now. Jesus, you change everything. Life, heal, hope, found here and now. Jesus, you change everything. You change everything. Jesus, you change everything. Show us your glory, God. Show us your glory. We need you. Chains fall, fear bow here and now. Jesus, you change everything. Life, heal, hope, found here now. Jesus, you change everything.
World News Today.
And only you can decide what you want this country to be, what you want to do with the future.
Vote like your whole world depended on it.
Voters should not be forced to go to the polls with their fingers crossed.
They understand what peace demands.
What America needs are leaders to match the greatness of her people.
Campaign appearances are getting closer and closer together as each candidate tries to get in his best shot.
Vote. The stakes are too high for you to stay home.
It's going to get dirtier in these last few days.
No apologies, no regrets. We will not be coerced. We will not tolerate being pushed around.
Well, good evening, Tribe Church, and welcome to our first Wednesday for October of the year 2020. As of last week, we are just 1 month away from Election Day in 2020, and it's a presidential election year. And so tonight's sermon is entitled, Avoiding Election Infection. There is just so much drama, so much chaos, so much tension associated with this year's presidential election. This will actually be my 6th time voting in a presidential election. I did the math. And from what I can tell, for my 6 presidential elections that I've been able to vote in, there's basically 2 types of people. There are people who love politics, and there are people who hate politics. There are people who are live tweeting the debate, and there are people who won't even watch the debate. When it comes to politics, at least in my experience, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of middle ground. You're on the right or you're on the left. You're either red or you're blue. You're an elephant or you're a donkey. And there are probably some of you right now who are saying to yourself, she shouldn't even be preaching about politics at all. They would say that the church needs to stay away from the political sphere, and that as pastors, we should not use our influence to sway people to vote one way or another. And I am one of them. I am one of those people. And so tonight we're going to talk about how God can use the Enneagram to help you live your life better. I wish. No, we're going to talk about politics. I'm kidding. We are going to talk about politics. But I am not going to tell you who to vote for. A lot of you know that I was a teacher for 15 years, and I always prided myself on bipartisan instruction whenever it came to anything that was political, but especially with the elections. In fact, my mother is still trying to get out of me who I voted for in 2016. And it was... No, I'm just kidding, Mom. I'm not going to tell you. You're never going to get that out of me. But in fact, if you just to throw you off just a little bit further, I want to tell you one of my all-time favorite Jack and Bailey stories. This happened when they were 4 and 6 years old. So we were driving. We were in the car, and Jackson was in kindergarten. And he was reading his little kindergarten book out loud, and it was the story of the Little Red Hen. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the story of the Little Red Hen, the Little Red Hen plants the wheat, and then she waters the wheat, and she gardens the wheat, she weeds the wheat, she harvests the wheat, she grinds the wheat, she kneads the wheat into bread, she bakes the bread, and then she eats the bread. And all the while, all the other farm animals, they are like watching her. They're not doing anything to help. She keeps offering for them to help her, but they will not come alongside her and help her. But then at the very end of the story, they're like, hey, that bread smells real good. Can we have some of that? And in the version of the story that Jackson was reading, the Little Red Hen does not share the bread with the other farm animals. She and her children just eat the bread because her kids were like kind of helping her the whole time. But the farm animals, they don't help and they don't get to eat. So as soon as Jackson is done with his little book, like he closes the book, 4-year-old Bailey chimes in and she goes, "That's a bad book." And Jackson is like, "Why?" And Bailey goes, "If you have more than you need, you should share." And Jackson looks over at Bailey and he's like, "Bailey, they didn't help her farm the bread. They didn't help her like with planting the wheat or watering the wheat or weeding the wheat. They didn't help her harvest. They didn't help her grind this wheat. They didn't help her bake the bread. Like they didn't help with anything. Like they laid by the pond and she worked hard for that bread, and so she shouldn't have to share the bread." And Bailey was like, "If you have more," this is 4-year-old Bailey, "if you have more than you need, you should share." This is what she's saying. And they like are arguing back and forth, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, heaven help me. I've got one of each. I've got a red and a blue. I've got an elephant and I've got a donkey. Like, what am I going to do with these children? And so tonight, we're going to talk politics, and I am going to push on things a little bit. I'm going to poke around on some things. And we're going to get started with that right now. I want to challenge you that starting tonight, you would put your faith ahead of your politics. You see, I think we've put politics and choosing a political party right up in that same category as like deciding to follow Jesus or getting married or having a baby. We treat it like it is a lifelong commitment. And instead of looking at it like it's a lifelong commitment, I would challenge you to maybe think of it not so much as like a lifelong commitment, but like traveling by bus from New York to LA. Like, I'm not making a lifelong commitment to this particular candidate or this particular party. Like, I'm just getting on a bus that I think is going to get me closer to where I want to be. That's kind of how I think you should think about it. If you want to talk more about the bus thing, I can talk to you about that sometime. We're going to move on from that. But I think we need to stop looking for the politician of our dreams and just get on a bus, travel that bus, and then get off that bus and pick a different bus the next time. Because another bus is going to come along, right? Yeah, good. It's all good. All right. When we view our political affiliation through the lens of lifelong commitment, I think it becomes an integral part of who we are. And it becomes really, really hard to put your faith before your politics because it's all like crammed in there together. And I need you, and Jesus needs you to be a Christ follower first and a Republican, like somewhere in the distance, like number 6 or 7. I need you to be a Christ follower first and a Democrat like nowhere in the top 5. I need you to be a Christ follower first and a libertarian like number, 8 or something like that. Or if you're an independent or whatever, I need you to put your faith values ahead of your political beliefs. And I know that you can do it. You might not know that you can do it yet, but I know that you can do it because as pastors, Matt and I have seen people walk through some really hard stuff. And no one, not one single person has ever said to us, hey, Matt, Carrie, what does the Constitution say about this issue? No one has ever asked us to read from the Bill of Rights at their wedding or a funeral. And when we do baby dedications, we don't mention the Declaration of Independence like at all. It's not even a part of it. As important as this is, and as politics is, and it is important, but as important as your politics are, it is important that you know deep down in your heart that it is not the most important thing in your life. And at the end of the day, your faith is more important to you than your politics. I am not suggesting that we should all agree because that is crazy. And I'm not even suggesting that all Christians should vote for a particular candidate or that there's a particular party that Christians can lean into. I am simply asking you to commit to putting your faith before your politics. And you're probably sitting there and you're thinking, yes, Pastor Carrie, you are right. Those guys need to really work at putting their faith before their politics. But what you don't understand is that I'm a Republican because I'm a Christian. The reason I am a Democrat is because of my faith. The reason I'm a libertarian is because God tells us that the truth will set us free. Free, libertarian, free, liberty. Do you get it? Yeah. Like, if your faith is the primary lens, a lot of people think that their faith is the primary lens that they're using when they talk about politics. And so you're probably sitting there saying to yourself right now, oh, Pastor Carrie, thank God, because those other guys, they really need to hear this. My faith and my politics, they just go together like this. And guys, that's not how it works. If you're a Republican, of course you think that you've got your faith first because God is always right. And Jesus was a Republican, right? Like he was always right. So he has to have been a Republican. And Jesus is one of his closest followers. Matthew was a tax collector. So of course Jesus was a Republican. And then the Democrats are over there and they're like, are you kidding me? Are you serious with this? Really? Really? Like, Jesus was a health care dispensing machine. Everywhere he went, he gave out health care for free. He gave away food for free. Jesus was clearly a Democrat. And the libertarians are over there. They're still on that whole the truth shall set you free thing. And they're like, right there, that proves that Jesus was a libertarian. Have I offended everyone yet? Is there anybody that I left out? There's nobody here. But if you were here, hopefully you would help me with that. When it comes to putting your faith before your politics, it is not enough to say Bible first, politics second. Because no matter where you stand politically, you can find something in the Bible that supports that stand. You can't say that Jesus is first and your political party is second because no matter where you stand, you can find something that Jesus says to support that viewpoint. As Christians, we all want Jesus on our side when it comes to politics. That makes sense. Of course you feel that way. When you read the Gospels, though, it tells us that Jesus didn't come here to be on anybody's side. He didn't come to take sides. He came to take over. He came to change everything. Simply finding something that Jesus said to support the way that you already feel is not good enough. Simply putting Jesus before your politics isn't enough. We have to train ourselves. Listen to this, guys. We have to train ourselves to approach everything the way that Jesus did. To get this right, we have to act like Jesus did. And there was one thing that Jesus did consistently throughout his ministry that we can still do today. It isn't complicated. It's actually really, really simple. And it's convicting, and it's transformational. The way that we keep our faith in front of our politics, as we do the thing that Jesus did over 2,000 years ago, is we put people first and politics second. Consistently throughout his ministry, Jesus wanted what was best for people. That is our common ground. It's our common ground as citizens, and it's our common ground as Christians. Because we can disagree on what is best for people, and we're going to. But what we have to come together on both sides of the party lines, we have to come together on the fact that what is best for people is what's best. I'm going to say that again. What is best for people is what's best. We can disagree on what's best for people. Any law, any bill, any Supreme Court nominee, we can disagree about what is best for people, but we cannot disagree that what is best for people is what is best. When we read the Gospels, this is so clear. I know that a lot of you participated in our 90 Days Through the Gospels back in the spring, so you know this. Jesus was for what's best for people. We know this because of the most famous verse in the Bible. John 3:16 says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish but have everlasting life." God gave up his Son for the people of the world. Jesus loved people, and he put people first. The thing that drove Jesus crazy was when people would put the religious law in front of people. They would use religious law to actually hurt actual people. And Jesus would say over and over again to people, you have this backwards. God did not create the law for the people for the law. He created the law for the people. God did not create the people for religion. He created religion for the people. And the religious leaders at the time, they were always trying to trap Jesus. And so one day they come up to him and they say, what's the most important thing? And what's the most important thing to God? What's the most important thing to you? And the thing was, these were all good Hebrew boys. They knew this answer. They'd grown up with this, they're hearing this their whole life. What's the most important thing? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul. And Jesus, he doesn't even take a breath when he's done with this, because he tells them that. He's a good Hebrew boy. He knows what he's supposed to be saying there. But then he doesn't even take a breath. He anticipates their next question before they even ask it, because he knows they're trying to trap him. And he says, and the second command is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. If you're sitting here tonight and you're not a Christian, you might have heard that before. You've probably heard that before. Love your neighbor as yourself. You might not know who was the first one to say it. It was Jesus. Why does he do this? Because that first answer, it is all internal. If you ask every single candidate who's running for anything right now, they're all going to claim to love God. And who's to say that they don't? It's kind of like when my brother says that he's colorblind. The first thing Matt always says to him is, prove it. Prove that you're colorblind, John. Do it. Prove it. Because you can't really, you kind of can, but you can't really, prove it. Prove that your love for God, that you love God with all your heart and all your mind and all your soul. Prove it. How can you prove it? We can't dispute whether or not someone really loves God, because there's so much wiggle room in there. We can't figure out, whether or not that's actually true. And that's why Jesus doesn't even pause before he starts in on the second one. He says, and the second one is like it. The second one is on the same level as the first. This was radical, you guys. And those of you who went through our 90 series, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. The second one is equivalent to the first. Love your neighbor as yourself. And this was such a bummer for the religious people. for the religious leaders, because if all I have to do is love God, then it doesn't really matter how I treat my neighbor. I can treat my neighbor the way my neighbor deserves to be treated. I can treat my neighbor the way my neighbor treats me. But Jesus tells us in Matthew 23, 39 to 40, all of the law and the commandments hang on these two, or all of the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. Everything that came before the new covenant, that was Jesus. That's what they call the law and the prophet. Now we call it the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible. All of that hangs on these two commandments from Matthew 23, 39 and 40. That's where the whole thing is found. That if you love God on the inside, and then we demonstrate that love for God by how we treat the people on the outside. Because Jesus tells us that it's what's most important is people. John 3:16 says it all. We can debate about what's best for people, but we cannot debate that what's best for people is the most important thing. What Jesus is saying here, and if you don't get anything else from tonight, if you remember nothing else from the Bible, if you don't remember anything else that I ever say, it's that the most important thing in the world is to love God and to demonstrate that love for God by how you treat the people that God created. The way you treat people who are made in the image of God is how you show a reflection for your love for God. If you want to keep your faith ahead of your politics, this is what you have to do. You have to put people ahead of politics. We can disagree about what's best for our neighbors, but we cannot forget the fact that what's best for our neighbors is the most important thing. It's the best. This is profoundly simple. Imagine if every person in the United States put this principle into practice, Christian or not Christian, because even most religions embrace this value of loving your neighbor or treating people well. Imagine that if every single person in the United States embraced this value of loving your neighbor as yourself, of doing things to others the way that you would want them done for you. If every single person did this between now and the election, our nation would be a different nation on election day. Most of our laws would be irrelevant. We could leave them on the books if we wanted to, but we wouldn't really need them because they would never have to be tested. Our country would be completely different. It would almost not matter who was president because what would happen in our country would be so powerful because Jesus is right. Everything hangs on those two commandments. Love God on the inside and love for people on the outside. Think about how radically different our country would look if we all loved our neighbors as ourselves. What do we always say here at Tribe? What do loved people do? Say it with me at home. Loved people love people. And those loved people would go out and love other people. And then those loved people would go out and love other people. And on and on and on and on it goes. Can we please commit to placing the value of placing our people ahead of our political beliefs? Something else to think about as we're continuing on here tonight is that your behavior always makes perfect sense to you, right? Like when someone asks, why did you do that? We almost never answer like, I have no idea why I did that, because our behavior makes perfect sense to us. And here's the thing, guys. Everyone is like that. You are not special. Like you're special and we love you, whatever. But like everyone is like that. Everyone's behavior makes sense to them. Every single person you've ever met, their behavior makes sense to them. All of the people you've seen on television, everybody you work with, your Facebook friends, everybody's behavior makes sense to them. To that end, your political views make sense to you. And you are not unique in this way. Everybody's political views make sense to them. When you don't know how someone could do such a thing, when you don't know how someone could believe such a thing, when you don't know how someone could support such a person or such a view, when you don't know how someone could believe or support or vote in such a way, then that means that there is something that you don't know about that person. And one of the best things that you can do in this political season, one of the best ways that you can keep your faith in front of your politics, when you find yourself wanting to interject yourself into a conversation, or you get a little bit of keyboard confidence, if you know what I mean, if you're beginning to lose your respect for someone, and man, I am preaching to myself here, the best thing you can do is be a student and not a critic. Ask questions. When you are a student and not a critic, you might just learn something. And if you are too old or too right about your own political leanings to learn something, then you are arrogant and you are insecure. And man, I wish y'all were here so that I could hear your reaction to that one. Because it is hard to say those words in an empty room, but it's true. If you are too old, if you think you're too old, or you think you are too absolutely 100% right about your political leanings, you are arrogant or you are insecure. If you are so amped up about your political opinion, because that's all they are opinions. There's no such thing as a political fact, okay? You are the problem. That's not a politics problem. That is a you problem. That is a heart problem. What if we looked at every election season not as a season to fight, but as a season to learn, to be a student first and a critic second? And some of you need to write this on a sticky note and put it on your mirror, put it on your steering wheel, put it on your coffee maker, that you want to be a student first and a critic second. Jesus followers should be the most confident, the most curious, the most composed, the most compassionate people in any room that they walk into. If you believe that you are a child of God, that should give you confidence. And Christians, we should be the most curious people on the planet because we believe that our God is a God of infinite wisdom. That means all of the wisdom, that his wisdom never runs out. He created the earth and the heavens, so Christians should never be afraid of science. Every new scientific discovery should be an opportunity for us to say, oh my gosh, that's how we did it. I had no idea. Like heavens to Betsy, we should be the most compassionate people that anyone has ever met. We should be the most composed people on the internet and in every room because we remember what we used to be and we remember the change that God made in us. This doesn't mean that we don't have an opinion. This doesn't mean that we don't have a view to share. It just means that when we present our views, we present them with compassion. As a Christ follower, you have the responsibility to treat other people with love. And as a person who goes to Tribe Church, you doubly have that responsibility. This is what you are called to do. And so I want to give you 4 questions. When you find yourself in an environment where you feel like you want to be critical, that can help you be a student instead. When you're tempted to walk away or to roll your eyes, and oh my gosh, I sometimes have to hold mine in because they'll just roll right out of my head. I want to give you 4 questions to ask instead so that you can stay curious, so that you can be a learner rather than a critic. Question 1 is, what led you to that view? When we get into debates, we are basically getting the last sentence of a long discussion that person might have spent years wrestling with and dealing with. And so if we just ask them, what makes you think that way? What made you feel that way? Can you tell me about the process that led you to that view? And when you do this, you are inviting someone to tell you a part of their story. And when you discover someone's story, it is really difficult to continue to judge and be critical of that person, or even just to think that they're incredibly dumb for believing a certain thing. When you get the context for someone's view, you begin to understand. And when you begin to understand, the temperature goes down in a room. Question number 2 is, have you always held this view? Have you always seen it this way? Like, have you always voted this way? What changed your mind? Like, if you were on the other side, what made you come over to this side? That's a great question. Have you always held this view? And the first one was, what led you to this view? The third one is admittedly a little sassy, okay? But when someone really gets going on a particular candidate, you can just ask, have you met him? Do you know her? Because the answer to that question is going to be no. And then you can just be like, And that puts the conversation, it kind of changes the direction of the conversation. It puts the guardrails back up on the conversation, because what we tend to do is get outside of our knowledge and sort of start making these wild claims that are super offensive about people that we have never met. And that's not okay. Question number 4 is also a little bit sassy. It's, hey, I get most of my information from the media. How do you get your information? Because the answer to that one's going to be like, oh, you get your information from the media too. So we are both marginally informed people, and we're both probably wrong about some things and right about some things. And please don't misunderstand this. This is not a dig on the media. We live in a 24-hour news cycle. Like, it is always running. There's no way it's all always correct. I'd like to say about the media about what I said about Jesus earlier. If you can always find something that supports your views. And so when you're getting your information from the media, all we know is what we're told. And a lot of us are controlling what we're told by looking at certain sites or certain news broadcasts or which people we follow. And a lot of that is targeted marketing as well. So for us, to create friction around a marginal and limited information is just nuts. It's crazy. It's foolish. Those are some questions that you can use to diffuse a room, to bring down the temperature in a room. Because at the end of the day, what matters most is people. So in conclusion, should you have a political opinion? Yes. Should you share your political opinion? Sometimes. Like, other people might need to learn from you, but you might also need to learn from other people. And should you make a point at the expense of your influence? Absolutely not. If you are a Christian, Jesus said that you are the light of the world. You are the salt of the earth. We have been called to influence people, and that affects their eternity. Their eternity is at stake. Leaders at Tribe, I am talking doubly to you right now, so pay attention. We as a church have been called to put families back together. We have been called to speak out against addiction. We have been called to call people out of darkness. We have been called to bring healing to people. We have been called to love God's people the way we love ourselves. And we have been called to do something that those callings are extraordinarily important. For heaven's sake, the word Christian means little Christ. The only way we can do this, the only way we can live out our calling is through our influence. Never, never, never give up your influence unnecessarily. That Facebook post or that Insta story that feels so good to get off your chest, stop it. You are losing your influence. Never give up your influence unnecessarily. Don't give it up with your kids. Don't give it up with your spouse. Don't give it up with your people at work, the people in your neighborhood, your extended family, the people on social media. Do not give it up, because your influence is worth so much more than any one political issue. Because the fact of the matter is that in the United States, your opinion doesn't count. It is your vote that counts, and you don't have to share your vote with anyone. Sorry, Mom. Like, you don't have to share your vote. Why would you give up your influence over something that doesn't matter when you can go and you can vote your conscience and actually make a difference? Never, ever, ever lose your influence. How tragic to give up your influence with someone about something that has to do with this election, because you guys, the temperature is going to go down, and what feels really important right now is not going to seem as important later, because when this election is over, your neighbor, your friend at work, maybe even your spouse or someone that you know at Tribe, if they have a need that you could meet, a need that you might joyfully and happily meet, they might not ask you, because you lost your influence with them, because you ran your mouth on the internet. That might not seem like a big deal right now, but oh my gosh, you guys, like, never, ever, ever give up your influence that we have as Christians, because we are called to be the light of the world. We can disagree about what is best for people, but we cannot disagree that what is best for people is what is the best thing. That is the most important thing. Let's pray. God, I love these people, and I am So thankful to you tonight for giving me the opportunity to preach about politics, because that's hard for me. It's hard for me to stand up here and say, stop it. But God, I know that these people do not want to lose their influence with the town of Plainfield. Help our people to put their faith before their politics. Help them to want, on a deep, deep level, what is best for people. Help them to love their neighbors as themselves. Guard their hearts and their mouths and sometimes their fingers over the next month. And God, please put your hand on this election. We pray that you would be glorified through what happens over the next month, not only in the people who are elected into office, but in the way that the people who are electing those people into office treat each other. It is in your name that we pray. Amen. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sitting through a sermon about politics. That is awesome. We love you. As you head out into your week, please remember that love is the best thing we do.
Better be good, Dill.
Woo-hoo!
Recording. We can have Travis over. I would enjoy that. He's a delightful person.
He's a delight. Travis is a delight. All right.